It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening when I invited my best friend Ryan over to cook dinner. We've been friends since college, almost 5 years now, and he's been my rock through every major life event since then. I've always been openly gay, and Ryan has always been the epitome of the supportive straight ally, the kind of friend who would correct people who made homophobic jokes, who would wingman for me at bars, and who never made me feel different or other. And yes, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed his athletic build, his perfectly tousled brown hair, or the way his green eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. But I had long ago filed those observations away in the box labeled "Appreciate but Don't Pursue," a box that many gay men with straight friends become quite familiar with over time. The kitchen in my small apartment had always been my sanctuary. It's where I experimented with recipes when stressed, where I hosted intimate dinner parties, and where I often found myself having the deepest conversations with friends over the chopping of vegetables or the stirring of sauces. There was something about the act of creating food together that broke down walls and encouraged vulnerability. So when Ryan texted saying he'd had a rough week at work, I immediately suggested he come over and we could cook something together to take his mind off things. I spent the entire day before his visit in a strange state of anticipation. We'd cooked together countless times before, so why did this particular invitation feel different? Perhaps it was the way he had sounded on the phone, a little broken, a little more vulnerable than usual. Or perhaps it was the dreams I'd been having lately, dreams where our friendship crossed boundaries I had always respected in waking life. Either way, I found myself cleaning my apartment with unusual thoroughness, selecting a playlist with particular care, and even changing my outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue Henley that I knew brought out my eyes. Let me explain why this matters. These small acts of preparation weren't just about hospitality. They were rituals of hope. Anyone who has ever harbored feelings for someone seemingly unattainable understands this peculiar form of magical thinking. If everything is perfect, maybe something magical will happen. It's irrational, of course, but emotions rarely consult with logic before making themselves known. When Ryan arrived, he brought a bottle of red wine and that smile, the one that always made my stomach flip like I was 16 again. "I needed this," he said as he pulled me into one of those brief, backslapping hugs that straight men have perfected. "Work has been absolutely brutal this week." He looked tired around the eyes, but still devastatingly handsome in his casual gray t-shirt and jeans. Ryan had always been effortlessly attractive, tall with broad shoulders from his college swimming days, with a natural confidence that drew people to him without seeming arrogant. The plan was to make fresh pasta from scratch, something neither of us had attempted before but had always wanted to try. I had borrowed a pasta machine from my neighbor and watched several YouTube tutorials in preparation. "I've laid out all the ingredients," I told him, gesturing to the flour, eggs, and olive oil arranged neatly on the counter. "But fair warning, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." Ryan laughed, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms corded with subtle muscle. "When has that ever stopped us before? Remember that time we tried to build that bookshelf from IKEA and ended up with what looked like abstract art?" And just like that, the initial awkwardness dissolved into our usual comfortable rhythm. We moved around my small kitchen, bumping into each other occasionally as we measured flour, cracked eggs, and kneaded dough. The conversation flowed easily from work complaints to mutual friends to the latest shows we'd been binging. This was why I loved spending time with Ryan. Everything was just easy. Well, almost everything. "I think we need more olive oil," Ryan said, frowning at the pasta dough that refused to come together properly. "It's too dry." I reached for the bottle of extra virgin olive oil I kept near the stove. "Here, but go easy on it." The recipe said just a drizzle. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ryan reached for the bottle just as I was handing it to him. Our fingers brushed, and somehow, whether from the slight jolt of electricity I felt at his touch or simple clumsiness, the bottle slipped. It hit the counter on its side, the cap flying off, and golden green oil began spreading across my countertop like a slow-motion tidal wave. "Shit!" Ryan exclaimed, lunging for the bottle to right it before all the contents could spill out. In his haste, he slipped slightly on a bit of flour that had fallen to the floor, and suddenly he was pressed against me, pinning me against the counter as he reached behind me to grab a kitchen towel. Time seemed to stop. His chest was against mine, his face inches away, and I could smell the subtle notes of his cologne mixed with the rich aroma of olive oil. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. His body was warm and solid against mine, and for a brief moment, his eyes met mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sorry," he murmured, but he didn't immediately move away. Was it my imagination, or did he linger there a fraction longer than necessary? The pressure of his body against mine sent my thoughts spiraling in directions I had long tried to avoid. I should explain the complexity of this moment. When you're attracted to someone you believe can never return your feelings, every touch becomes both exquisite and painful, a gift you treasure and a reminder of what you can't have. The physical closeness is intoxicating, but the emotional distance remains unbridgeable. At least, that's what I had always told myself about Ryan. "No problem," I managed to say, my voice sounding strangely tight even to my own ears. "Accidents happen." He finally stepped back, breaking the spell, and we both turned our attention to the spreading oil. "Man, I'm so sorry about the mess," he said, grabbing more paper towels and beginning to mop up the oil. "I'll buy you another bottle." "Don't worry about it," I said, trying to sound casual while my mind replayed the feeling of his body against mine. "I have another bottle in the pantry. Besides, now our pasta will have a story attached to it." As we cleaned up the spill, working side by side, I couldn't help but notice how Ryan seemed slightly different, more aware of the space between us, more careful not to touch me again. Had he felt something in that moment too? Or was he simply embarrassed about the accident? The uncertainty was maddening. With the counter cleaned and fresh oil carefully measured into our pasta dough, we continued our cooking adventure, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. The easy banter continued, but underneath it ran a current of tension I couldn't quite name. I caught Ryan looking at me a few times when he thought I wouldn't notice, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said as we finally fed the dough through the pasta machine, watching with satisfaction as it emerged in perfect thin sheets. "I've been thinking a lot lately about how we never really know what's going on in other people's heads. Like, we make all these assumptions about what people want or feel, but unless we actually ask, we're just guessing." I nearly cut myself with the knife I was using to slice the pasta sheets into fettuccine. Was this a random philosophical observation, or was he trying to tell me something? "That's true," I said carefully. "People can surprise you. You've always been good at that," he continued, not looking at me as he focused on turning the crank of the pasta machine. "Being honest about who you are and what you want. I've always admired that about you." My heart was doing gymnastics in my chest now. "Not always," I admitted. "There are things I don't say, people I don't want to scare away." Now he did look up, his green eyes searching my face. "You could never scare me away. You know that, right?" The moment hung between us, heavy with possibility. I thought about all the times we'd stayed up late talking, all the casual touches that had meant so much more to me than they should have, all the times I'd watched him date women and try to be happy for him while nursing my own private heartache. I thought about telling him then, laying my feelings bare and risking our friendship for the chance at something more. But the fear of rejection, of awkwardness, of losing him entirely, kept the words locked in my throat. "I know," I said instead. "Best friends, right?" Something flickered across his face. Disappointment? Relief? I couldn't tell. "Right?" he agreed, turning back to the pasta. "Best friends." We finished making our pasta in companionable silence, and as we waited for the water to boil, Ryan opened the wine he'd brought. We clinked glasses in a small toast. "To cooking adventures," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And to honesty," I added impulsively, the wine already loosening my careful restraint. His eyebrows rose slightly at that. "Honesty," he repeated, taking a long sip of his wine. "Speaking of honesty, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." My stomach dropped. In my experience, that phrase rarely preceded good news. Had he sensed my feelings? Was he about to gently let me down, to establish boundaries I had never actually crossed? I braced myself. "What's up?" Ryan set his wine glass down and leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair in that way he did when he was nervous. "I broke up with Jessica last month." This was news to me. Jessica was his latest girlfriend, a pretty pharmaceutical rep he'd been dating for about 6 months. "I'm sorry to hear that. You didn't mention anything was wrong." He shrugged. "Nothing was wrong, exactly. She's great. It just didn't feel right." He paused, looking at me intently. I've been doing a lot of thinking since then. About what I want. Who I want. There was something in his voice that made my pulse quicken. And what conclusions have you reached? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. That's the thing, he said, taking a step closer to me. I'm not sure I've reached a conclusion so much as opened a door to questions I never let myself ask before. Another step closer. Questions about myself. About us. The air between us seemed to crackle with electricity. Ryan, I said cautiously, what are you saying? He was close enough now that I could see the different flecks of color in his green eyes, could smell the wine on his breath. I'm saying that when I slipped earlier, when I was pressed against you, I felt something I wasn't expecting to feel. And it wasn't the first time. My mind raced to process his words. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? You're straight, I said, the statement sounding more like a question. He smiled slightly. That's what I've always thought. It's what made sense. But lately, I've been wondering if maybe it's not that simple. Maybe I'm not as straight as I thought. Or maybe, he took a deep breath, maybe it's just you. The pasta water was boiling over on the stove, but neither of us moved to turn it down. The moment felt too fragile, too important to break. Ryan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. If this is some kind of experiment for you, or if you're confused. I am confused, he interrupted. I'm completely confused. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel something I don't feel with anyone else. And today, when I had you pressed against that counter, all I could think about was what it would be like to kiss you. The confession hung in the air between us, changing everything and nothing all at once. I had imagined this scenario in countless different ways over the years, but now that it was happening, I found myself frozen, afraid that any movement might shatter this moment like glass. Say something, Ryan said, vulnerability plain in his voice. Please. I took a deep breath. I've wanted to kiss you since the day we met, I admitted. But I never thought it was possible. I never thought you could feel the same way. Relief flooded his features. I don't know exactly what I feel, he said honestly. I just know I want to find out. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure it out. The pasta was definitely ruined by now, the water having boiled over and the noodles likely reduced to mush. But I couldn't bring myself to care. I've been patient for 5 years, I said with a small smile. I think I can manage a little longer. And then, with the gentleness of someone approaching something precious and fragile, Ryan reached out and placed his hand on my cheek. His palm was warm against my skin, and I leaned into his touch instinctively. Can I? He asked, his eyes dropping to my lips. In answer, I closed the distance between us. The first brush of his lips against mine was hesitant, questioning. But when I responded, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him closer, his hesitation melted away. He kissed me with an intensity that took my breath away, his arms encircling my waist and pressing me back against the counter. The same counter where our moment of truth had begun with spilled olive oil. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Ryan rested his forehead against mine. That was, yeah, I agreed, unable to stop the smile spreading across my face. It was. The sound of water hissing as it hit the hot stovetop finally broke through our bubble. I think we killed the pasta, Ryan laughed, reluctantly pulling away to turn off the burner. Worth it, I said, still feeling the ghost of his lips on mine. We can always order takeout. He turned back to me, his expression more serious now. I don't want you to think this is just, I don't know, curiosity or experimentation for me. I genuinely care about you. I always have. This is just a side of myself I never let myself explore before. I nodded, understanding the complexity of what he was going through. Coming to terms with sexuality is rarely a straightforward path, and for someone who had always identified as straight, acknowledging attraction to someone of the same sex could be disorienting and frightening. We can take this as slow as you need, I assured him. There's no rush. And if you decide this isn't what you want after all, we'll find a way to be okay. Our friendship comes first. Relief softened his features. Thank you for understanding. But right now, I'm pretty sure this is exactly what I want. He stepped closer again, his hands finding my waist. Though I might need a little more convincing. This time when he kissed me, there was no hesitation, only certainty. And as I kissed him back in my olive oil-splattered kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our failed cooking experiment, I marveled at how life's most beautiful moments often arrive in the most unexpected ways. We did eventually order that takeout, Thai food from the place down the street. and spent the rest of the evening talking more openly than we ever had before. Ryan shared how he had started questioning his sexuality months ago, how certain moments with me had confused and intrigued him, how breaking up with Jessica had been partly because he couldn't stop thinking about what it might be like to be with me instead. I shared my side too, how I had resigned myself to loving him from a distance, how I had dated other men while always comparing them to him, how I had both dreaded and hoped for this very moment. As the night grew late, our conversation shifted from revelations to possibilities. What would this mean for us going forward? How would we navigate this new territory? There were no easy answers, but for the first time, the questions didn't feel frightening. They felt like adventures waiting to unfold. When Ryan finally left that night, with a lingering kiss at my doorway that promised more to come, I returned to my kitchen and looked at the scene of our evening. The abandoned pasta machine, the empty takeout containers, the bottle of olive oil that had changed everything. I couldn't help but laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sometimes the most profound changes in our lives begin with the smallest accidents. A spilled bottle, a moment of closeness, the courage to speak truth in the face of uncertainty. As I cleaned up the remnants of our evening together, I found myself filled with a hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I didn't know exactly where this new chapter with Ryan would lead us. Perhaps it would blossom into the relationship I had secretly longed for. Perhaps it would be a brief exploration before he returned to what was familiar. But standing in my kitchen, still feeling the echo of his touch, I knew that whatever happened, I would never regret this night. The night when spilled olive oil and unexpected courage transformed a friendship into something with the potential to be so much more. And as I finally turned off the lights and headed to bed, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the most delicious things in life aren't what we carefully plan, but what we discover when our original recipes go wonderfully, beautifully wrong. Total_char_count. 18,142.